back to Killer Talk with Tosha. Today's episode is admittedly 2 parts in one and may be a bit hard to follow, so pay close attention as we discuss our killer, Guy Muldavin, and all his crimes. Before we begin, I do want to issue a warning. This video may be triggering for some people. It has talk of sexual assault and descriptive talk of assault leading to a murder, as well as domestic violence and after the murder crimes. I also would like to point out that if you hear a bunch of pitter patter today, our dogs are in here with us. We noticed in the last video that, here comes Chase, that we could hear their sounds up and down the steps, so we decided today that we were going to bring them in here with us. Now, once again, Brett joins us, and he has no clue what case I am covering. And before we begin, Brett, do you have something you want to say today to our viewers? Maybe start us off on a lighter note before we get all dark and gloomy?
About what?
I don't know. You wanted to talk to them about some plants or something.
I'm gonna start a cactus. I'm gonna let you guys know how it's going.
We started growing some strawberries. We have already got a bunch of other herbs that we're growing as well that are going really, really good. I do have some of them that do not appear to be going past the baby stage, but I'll keep you guys posted on those as well. All right, let's get into it. Today's sources come from theguardian.com, wikipedia.com, NBCBoston.com, and true crime writer Ann Rule's 2007 book, Smoke, Mirrors, and Murder, to Muldavin in connection with the Ryan Mearns disappearances. Today's case, Guy Muldavin and the Lady of the Dunes, brings us back once again to 1974. This time to a city near Cape Cod called Provincetown, Massachusetts, as well as several other cities and states over a period of several years, to discuss not only the unidentified body of a woman known as the Lady of the Dunes that went 48 years without being identified, and how once she was identified, her murder was ultimately solved, as well as all the other suspected crimes that her killer Guy Muldavin committed over the years that could have possibly prevented her murder and have been caught beforehand, had he been caught beforehand. The discovery of the Lady of the Dunes is where we first start. Now, this entire case took me down an entire rabbit hole and just piqued my interest. So, first we start with the case that took me down the rabbit hole of Guy Muldavin. The case of the Lady of the Dunes. Now, on July 26, 1974, unfortunately, a 12-year-old girl followed a barking dog to a decomposing body of an unidentified woman in the Race Point Dunes of Provincetown, Massachusetts. Once again, a city not far from us. The remains, located just yards away from a road, had a significant amount of insect activity. 2 sets of footprints led to the body, and tire tracks were found 50 yards from the scene. The woman may have died 2 weeks prior to discovery. The victim was laying face down on a half of a beach blanket, and there was no sign of a struggle, leading police to have theorized she either knew her killer or had been asleep when she died. A blue bandana and a pair of Wrangler jeans were near her head. She had long auburn hair, and it was pulled back into a ponytail by a gold-flecked elastic band. Her toenails were painted pink, and police determined the woman was approximately 5'6" tall. Now, although they initially believed her to have been 5'8" and weighed about 145 pounds and had an athletic build. She also had extensive dental work, including crowns worth $5K and between $5K and $10K. Several of her teeth had been removed, and both hands and one forearm were missing. Most sources say she was between 25 and 40 years old. However, she could have been as young as 20 or as old as 49. She was nearly decapitated, meaning her head was nearly cut off. possibly from strangulation. One side of her head had been crushed, possibly with a military-type digging tool. The head injury was ruled cause of death, and there was also signs of sexual assault likely to have occurred post-mortem, meaning after death. So somebody raped her after she was dead. Some investigators believe that the missing teeth and forearm indicate the killer wanted to hide either the victim's identity or their own. The woman was buried in October 1974. Afterwards, the case went cold. And in 2014, one of the case investigators raised funds for a new casket because the original thin metal casket had rusted and deteriorated. Police pored over thousands of missing person cases and a list of approved vehicles driven through the area, and no matches were found. At the scene, the sand and beach blanket were not disturbed, suggesting the body was possibly moved to the specific spot where it was found. No other evidence was found besides the jeans, bandana, blanket, and ponytail holder, despite extensive searches of the surrounding dunes. The first facial reconstruction of the woman was created with clay in 1979. Her remains were exhumed in 1980 for examination. No clues were uncovered. Although the skull was not buried at the time, the body was exhumed again in March 2000 for DNA testing, and in May 2010, a CT of her skull was carried out that generated images that were then used by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children for another reconstruction. In 1987, a Canadian woman told a friend that she saw her father strangle a woman in Massachusetts around 1972. Now, while this is unlikely our victim because it was 2 years before the murder, police still attempted to locate the woman but were unsuccessful. Another woman told police the reconstruction of the victim looked like her sister who had disappeared in Boston in 1974, but this too was determined to not be our victim. Investigators also followed a lead involving missing criminal Rory Jean Kessinger, who would have been 25 years old at the time of the murder, thinking maybe the victim could be her, seeing as she broke out of jail in 1973 and authorities saw a resemblance between Kessinger and the victim. Two other missing women, Frances Ewalt and Vicki Lamberton, were also ruled out. In August 2015, speculation even arose that the Lady of the Dunes may have been an extra in the 1975 film Jaws, which had been shot in Martha's Vineyard, specifically the village of Menincha, about 100 miles south of Provincetown, between May and October of 1974. Joe Hill, the son of horror author Stephen King, brought this to police's attention after reading The Skeleton Crew, How Amateur Sleuths Are Solving America's Coldest Cases, just weeks before. After watching the film's 4th of July beach scene, Hill spotted a woman in the crowd wearing a blue bandana and jeans similar to those found with the body. Although a lead investigator had noted interest in this lead, others have described it as far-fetched and a wild speculation. Finally, in 2022, after 48 years of not being able to identify the woman dubbed the Lady of the Dunes, she was finally identified as Ruth Terry through DNA from her son. The FBI used investigative genealogy to finally solve this part of the case. Now, Ruth Marie Terry, dubbed the Lady of the Dunes until this past October, was born September 8, 1936, in a mountainside shack in Whitwell, Tennessee, to a coal miner, Johnny, and Eva Terry, who sadly died at the age of 23. Ruth's sister-in-law, Jan Terry, described Ruth as beautiful and caring, saying she loved her family and her family loved her. With her brother Ken adding in, she was a free spirit. She was just looking for something more than just a country life, I guess you'd say. And in the late 1950s, when Ruth was around the age of 19, she left Whitwell to work at the Fisher Body Automotive Plant in Livonia, Michigan. It was during this time she gave birth to her son, Richard Hanchett, who was raised by Ruth's friends who could give him a stable life. Now, Ruth eventually left Michigan and she moved to California, where at some point she meets a man named Guy Muldavin, and they marry just months before her murder. After his parents died, however, Richard Hanchett began searching for his biological parents and took a DNA test in 2018. The test eventually connected him to the Terry family, only to learn his mom had vanished and was still missing. The year before Ruth died, she tried to reach out to her son, but Richard, who was a teenager at the time, said he was not ready to connect, unaware that he would never get the chance to connect with his birth mom again. In 1942, Guy Muldavin was living in New York City and attended the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. He was disqualified from active service in the military during World War II due to a mastoid infection, which is a serious bacterial infection of the bone located behind the ear. On May 11th, 1946, while working as a professor, he married his first wife, Jo Ellen Loop, in Bellevue, Pennsylvania. The couple lived in New York, California, and then Seattle, Washington, where Muldavin worked as a disc jockey. The couple divorced on July 16th, 1956. 2 years later, on September 30th, 1958, Guy married Manzanita Eileen Ryan, who went by Manzi, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Manzi had a daughter from a previous marriage, Dolores Ann Mearns, then age 18. This would be his first crime, noted. Both women disappeared in Seattle on April 1st, 1960, with Guy becoming the prime suspect. He fled Seattle, but was arrested by the FBI and charged with unlawful flight to avoid giving testimony into their deaths. Shortly thereafter, on July 29th, 1960, Guy marries Evelyn Marie Emerson in King County, Washington, and they married a second time on August 10th, 1963, in Los Angeles. Guy subsequently faced larceny charges for swindling his third wife's family out of $10,000 around the time that his second wife went missing. In 1961, he was convicted of those charges and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Now, had this next part not happened, he may not have been free to kill his next wife. But a judge did suspend the sentence in March of 1962, provided that he pay back the money he stole.
That's a lot of money.
According to the true crime writer Ann Rule's 2007 book, Smoke, Mirrors, and Murder, to Muldavin in connection with the Ryan Mearns disappearances, with an extensive discussion of police efforts to connect Guy Muldavin with the crime, investigators found dismembered human body parts in Muldavin's septic tank, but were unable to prove that they were from either of the already missing women. Muldavin was never charged in connection, as the King County prosecutor was reluctant to do so without a body. Rule also mentions that Muldavin marries a woman named Terry in February of 1974 in Reno, Nevada. This was proven by authorities to be Ruth Terry. Terry's family corroborated this relationship when they mentioned to Boston 10 News that the couple visited the Terry family in Tennessee that same year. Now, Muldavin is also the prime suspect in the murder of Henry Lawrence Baird, a 28-year-old bread truck driver who went by the name of Red, and the disappearance of Barbara Jo Kelly, a 17-year-old waitress in June 1950. Barbara was last seen in Humboldt County, California on June 17, 1950, when she embarked on a date with Red, who was her boyfriend. Red's body was discovered face down on a beach near Table Bluff the following morning. He was shot in the back of the head, except for his shoes and socks, he was naked. Barbara's personal clothing was found carefully folded and tucked underneath the rest of Red's, with the exception of her shoes and stockings. No trace of Barbara herself could be found. She has not been seen or heard from since, and it is thought that whoever shot Baird kidnapped her. Muldavin moved to Chihuahua, I cannot pronounce this, California, a small community near Salinas, around 1976. And according to a feature article written about him in 1985, he had retired from his job as an executive vice president of a silver store on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. In the profile, he was working.
I gotta shut this window. Hold on.
Alright, lay down, guys. Sorry about that.
Sorry, let me find where I was at. According to a feature article written about him in 1985, he had retired from his job as an executive vice president of a silver store on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. In the profile, he was working at the radio station KAZU in Pacific Grove as a volunteer host of a 3-hour weekly call-in show on aging, growing, and making transitions. He also worked as a tobacco shop in Carmel. According to his obituary, he was born in Santa Fe, New Mexico on October 26, 1923, and he died of a lengthy illness in Salinas, California on March 14, 2002, survived by his new wife, Phyllis Muldavin, and his sister, Joan Towers. And on August 28, 2023, Guy Muldavin was officially named as Ruth Terry's killer.
Chase, lay down.
Now, he was named officially her killer, but he was never convicted of the other crimes. The only crime he was ever convicted of was the stealing the $10,000. How does a woman like Ruth Terry find herself with a man like Guy Muldavin, who had such a violent past? And how does a guy like Guy Muldavin get away with all that he got away with?
I don't know. That was a short one.
It was short, but it was still. It took me down
all 3 of his wives.
Yeah, no, not all 3 of them. He divorced the first one, killed the second one and her daughter, but they're still declared missing, not dead. But come on, all the bodies, parts in the septic tank. We know they're not missing. They're dead. And then he killed his 3rd wife, and then married a 4th time, and was survived by her.
That's crazy. It was that short.
But he also he also killed a trucker, and most likely the girlfriend of the trucker, who is still disappeared. It's still considered missing.
Oh, so you did a different one than the Lady of the Dunes?
No, that was all of them. The Lady of the Dunes was his 3rd wife.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how I got into Guy Muldavin. Like, I went down the rabbit hole of him because I was originally researching the Lady of the Dunes, but when you research her, you get more on Guy Muldavin than you really do her, because I guess she didn't really have that much of a presence out there.
All right.
Which is sad. And I think it's really sad that she never got the chance to actually have a relationship with her child, but
that's for as small as that story was, she has so much phone storage on her phone that it wouldn't even record it. So we had to use mine.
We're gonna have to use yours from now on because mine's so full.
We're working on getting a better camera and some mics and stuff so that we can make this actually legit for you guys, because she wants to do it and I'm gonna help her do it so she feels more comfortable doing it. So I want her to be all set up, and we're slowly working on it, but we'll get better at all this.
So what do you guys think about the story today? Why do you think she ended up with a guy like that? And why do you think he was able to get away with everything he got away with for as long as he did? Let us know. We'll see you guys next week. And I apologize for this one being a week late. Last week was a little tough for me and I just needed a mental health week. But we will officially be getting these out on a weekly basis now. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.